It was December 24th of 1987. My family went to visit my great aunt in Willington, Delaware, as we often did for Christmas. Her husband had died in this house some 20 years earlier. After dinner, my brother and I went to sleep in one of the upstairs bedrooms. I went to sleep on the left side of the bed, which was closest to the door. My great aunt has a thing where she hated her doors to be shut and absolutely not to be locked, so it was wide open as we drifted off. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sounds of something on the roof. I was 7 and had just about given up my belief in Santa, but it really sounded like footsteps. Could it be him? I tried to wake up my brother, but to no avail. Shortly thereafter, I turned to my left to see a figure just outside of the doorway. It was human-shaped with its arms stretched towards the frame. It was completely black. I know someone was there because it was darker than the surrounding shadows casted in the hall. The only person in the house that was that large was my father. Supposing it was him, I said, "Dad." No response. At this point, I was starting to get scared and focused on its head to see its face. The only feature I could make out were 2 red points of lights where the eyes should have been. It was then that I realized that I had fucked up by speaking aloud and letting it know that I was awake. I have rarely before or since felt such dread. I reached to my right to try to wake up my older brother. Again, no dice. I was alone with this thing 3 feet away from me. The only thing I could think to do was to pull the blanket up over my head, pretend that I was sleeping, and hope to God that it didn't hear me. Several minutes later, I peered under the blankets and it was gone. About 5 years later, I was riding to school with my brother and mom, and I worked up enough nerve to tell them about it. I knew it could have been my imagination, so I told them with an air of levity. When I was done, they were silent for about 2 minutes. When I asked my mom what was wrong, she turned towards me in the back seat and said, "We've seen him too." I have been thinking about this encounter for over 20 years now, and I still can't make sense of it, so I figured I would just share. Approximate date and location, 1997, maybe 1998, in the Appalachian region of the Carolinas in the southeast United States. I was a kid, probably 1st grade, maybe 2nd. I was sitting on the couch in our old trailer with my backpack on. It was a double wide, so I could look across through the wall opening to the dining room from the couch in the living room very easily. It was a small space, so this wasn't far away at all. As I'm sitting there waiting for my mom to finish drying her hair, she had huge fluffy hair because it was the 90s. I look up and directly in front of me, standing, or more like floating, behind the dining room table is this solid black man. I look at him, and he turns to look at me. We do make eye contact, if you can call it that, because his eyes are just like 2 burning red holes. When he makes eye contact with me, it feels like time stops, and I feel the most complete terror that I have ever felt, even to this day. And frankly, I've been through a statistically improbable number of really terrifying things. Nothing compares to that of this feeling at all. I was completely frozen, absolutely terrified, and after all what feels like an eternity within that moment, he just turns and kind of floats out of the end of the trailer. As soon as it ends and he's gone, I immediately jump up and run screaming to my mother. I tell her just what exactly happened, and she tells me that it's okay. That was just my grandpa. And I insist to her that he was absolutely not my grandfather. We're from Appalachia, so ghosts and things like that are well accepted and real, although it is definitely also understood that sometimes people make shit up for the sake of a tall tale. So yes, ghosts are real. but you have to look at them with an attitude of discernment. Anyway, I still can't make sense of any of it at all. About a decade ago, in my early 20s, I found a story online about shadow men with hats, and that really shook me up because it was the first time I had encountered somebody talking about anything similar to what I had experienced. But I haven't ever seen any accounts of this specific guy. The sheer terror I had felt, completely consumed by fear, gives me an indication that whatever this thing was, it was not kind or good. Does anyone have any similar experiences? It occurs to me that it might be relevant to include that a lot of really messed up, abusive, violent stuff happened in that house and on that land, and that I was raised experiencing things that no child should ever experience. We'll leave it at that. Anyway, a lot of darkness and straight up evil was in that environment. On the morning of January 4th of 1979, a cold, dark morning with snow on the ground, I had the strangest experience in my whole life. I live in a small council house in Bluestone Walk, Rowley Regis, near Birmingham. The house is one of a number on a small estate surrounded by wasteland and quarries. We are near Harrelstone Quarry, and our road is named after the Bluestone Quarry. We, my husband Cyril and myself, have lived here for 9 years. We have an Alstanian dog, Hobo, who is 2.5 years old. I work at a factory making soundproofing for cars, and my husband is employed at cement works. The house has a small front garden and a small lawn at the back about 17 feet by 11 feet. There is a carport at the end of the lawn and a shed. A door opens to a road at the back of the house. My husband was going to work by car, and I stood at the back door to wave him off. Hobo, our dog, was by my side. When my husband had gone, I saw a light in the garden and thought, Cyril has left the light on in the carport. I went down the garden to the carport, but saw that the light was switched off. As we turned to go back to the house, I saw an orange light over the garden, which gradually turned white. It lit the whole garden. We went into the back door of the house. Suddenly, a sound like Z, Z, Z. 3 beings floating past me through the open door. They glowed with a brilliant light and seemed to float about a foot above the floor. As they floated past me into the lounge, I saw that they had wonderful wings. I was so terrified that I grabbed a steel sink in the kitchen. I couldn't speak. I was frozen. I looked at Hobo. He seemed to hobble to his drinking bowl, swaying from side to side. His hair was sticking out all over like a hedgehog's. Yet Hobo is afraid of nothing. He seemed as though he has been drugged. He just flopped down and laid on the floor, stiff, with his eyes open. I felt as though all the blood in my body had drained out through my toes. I was paralyzed. My mouth was wide open. I couldn't move or speak, and after a while, the fear seemed to leave me. I felt as if I was lifted up. I wondered what was happening to me. I felt as if I were a different person, as though I was in heaven, although I was still at home. I seemed to float into the lounge. I held the door, but my feet didn't touch the ground. The doors were wide open, and it was bitterly cold morning, but I felt warm. All the downstairs lights were on as it was dark outside. I could hear the little artificial Christmas tree shaking, but the light was so brilliant that I had to cover my eyes. The 3 creatures seemed to read my mind. It was like a light or an X-ray penetrating my mind. When I took my hands from my eyes, I could see. They seemed to have turned down the light that was surrounding them. There was a glow around their heads. I could see them clearly. They were shaking and tugging at the little Christmas tree. There they were, 3 little slim men in silvery green tunics and silver waistcoats with silver buttons or pressed studs. They were about 3 feet 6 inches to 4 feet high, all alike. Their pointed hands and feet were covered in the same silvery green, and they had pointed caps on their heads of the same color and with something like a lamp on top. They had transparent fishbowl helmets over their heads, which rested on their shoulders. There were no eyebrows or ears to be seen. Their faces were waxy white, corpse-like, and they had black diamond eyes. I don't know how much about precious stones, but that is how I would describe them. I didn't notice their noses. Their mouths were very thin. Their wings were wonderful, large, oval-shaped and glowing with rainbow colors. Red, violet, gold, blue, and green, but more beautiful than our earthly colors. Their wings were covered in dots like braille dots. I thought of Joseph's coat of many colors. Our colors seemed like chemical colors compared to them. They were floating around, lounging, touching everything. The Christmas cards, the clock, the radio, and all the furniture. At last I could speak. I said, 3 of you and 1 of me. What are you going to do? What do you want with me? Each of them put their hands to their chests with their pointed hands and seemed to manipulate the buttons. A beep sound came from each being's chest, and then the voice came from the chest. The mouths never moved. They all spoke together. We shall not harm you. Where have you come from? I asked, and they said, we come from the sky. They started to shake the little Christmas tree again, and the little fairy fell from the top. I still seemed paralyzed. I couldn't move to pick it up. I said, we put up a tree at Christmas because we believe Jesus was born then. They said, we know all about Jesus. They were looking at the Sunday papers on the table. There was an honors list on the front page. I said, these people have been made lords. They said, there is only one Lord. They looked at a picture on the Queen, and I said, you should go to the Queen or go see a real lady. I wondered why they came to me as I am just a working woman. They said, you are a lady. We have a large lounge with a corner unit couch. They sat on the couch and bounced like children. I told them to be careful on my furniture, and they stopped. When I spoke sharply, they put the light up, so I thought I had better be friendly with them. They were only small, but they seemed to have power in their bodies that might have harmed me. My eyes still felt sore from the bright light, but I felt happy with them. They looked at me with friendly eyes, I thought, and I said I can call you creature so you can call you gentleman. I started to say, it's nice to see you. They replied with the same words. When they floated about the room with their wings, they fluttered gently. There was no sound. When they moved through the open door to the hall, they folded their wings behind their backs like pleated fans. They circled in the hall, then floated upstairs. The doors to the upstairs rooms were closed and they floated down again. They picked up the tapes for the tape recorder and looked at the packets of cigarettes on the sideboard. There were bottles of whiskey and sherry on the sideboard as it was not long after Christmas. I went to the kitchen and fetched 4 glasses of water. I put them on a metal tray. I thought I would bring one for myself as well to show that it wasn't poisoned, and to drink with them to keep them company. As I came near with the metal tray, I could hardly hold it. The tray seemed to be magnetized towards them. I put the tray down on the table and each of them picked up the glass when I lifted mine. They seemed about to lift their masks, but when they saw me watching, they put the power light on. I didn't actually see them drink, but when they put the glasses back on the tray, the water was gone. They seemed to put a light on me to draw out the words they wanted to hear. I was stuttering with nervousness. I was talking about politics and women going to work. They seemed interested and had an understanding of what I was talking about. But then all of a sudden, when I turned my back, they just disappeared. Now, I've had a lot of nice letters from people who were interested after reading the reports in the papers. Some people sent tapes to be returned to them with my own story. The West Bromwich College of Technology television production course students have made a film of me telling my story. It was filmed at the Technical College on March 19th, 1979. My eyes were sore for about a week, and I had to wear dark glasses. I've had to have some weeks away from work as I haven't felt well, and the doctor advised me to have a rest. My jaws ached after staring with my mouth open with shock when I first saw the beings. I've never read books about UFOs. I only read the papers. I don't look at a lot of television, but like the Crossroads programs and Coronation Street and Love Stories, some people have made jokes about me. But people who know me believe me, as I know I am truthful. In a taped interview I heard, she told of receiving envelopes containing Mars Bar's wrappers. Some people have written to say that they think the visitors were elves or beings from the fairy kingdom, or even robots. But I don't know what to think. I know I shall never forget them. If I live to be 100, a few days later we tried the tapes that have been handled by the beings. They were so distorted that they were ruined. Before January 4th, they were quite normal. I have attempted to locate the filmed interview with Miss Hingley, but have so far been unsuccessful in locating it. If anyone knows of such a recording still in existence, please let me know. Additionally, if anyone knows the original Birmingham UFO group that took those soil samples, that would be of use as well.